This is probably the lowest effort way to boost your score. And that's because of the fact that you're going to improve your score on the questions that you generally get incorrect by improving your guessing strategy, right? And all of those test taking tips that are going to help you boost your score without that much effort. That's not necessarily bad, but it's actually helpful because it's going to help you target those questions that you're struggling with. So if your SAT is really close by, this is going to help you improve that score the quickest. You're going to have to excuse the voice. I have a little bit of a cold. I've been sick all weekend, but I compiled this as a way to help you improve your score the fastest for the October SAT. So everything that's going to help you improve your score in the closest amount of time, right? And this isn't a substitute for learning or actually taking practice tests. I don't want this to be like that, but it's going to help you increase your accuracy, and you definitely should know it. So hi, I'm Karthik. These are last minute strategies to help you improve your score. All right. So the first thing is explicit details, right? Generally in reading, we know that every single concept, every single answer choice that we deduct, right, has to be based on some explicit truth in the passage, right? It has to have said something explicitly. It has to have said something in the passage that just outright says it, right? Maybe in different words, but it just says it, right? And we can't use things that are heavily implied. So let's say we read this passage and it heavily implies that the author would agree with a statement, but it never actually says that he would, right? Or he does, right? So that's a common trick that the reading SAT likes to do, is put question choices where you would assume that the author, or whoever the passage is talking about, or if it's some fictional character, that they would agree with a certain answer choice, right? But it's never expected that you agreeing with that specific answer choice is actually explicitly put in the passage, right? That's the main concept behind eliminating on specific details, right? Is that if a certain thing is not explicitly stated in the passage anywhere, right? And you should generally know that, because you're going to need to do a reread every time you see any of these questions that are asking you for specific details. You can eliminate the idea of any question choice that relies on a specific character in the story or the actual author themselves agreeing with something that they wouldn't necessarily agree with, or with something that they would agree with, but it's not explicitly written in the passage that they would, right? There isn't a specific detail that would allude to him exactly agreeing with that, just like his general sentiment would seem that he would agree with that. That's not good enough, right? The SAT loves to put in answer choices like that, and you can eliminate questions just based on that, right? For reading, I'm going to explain how I read and what my strategy is, but I highly recommend that you don't adopt this if you already have a strategy that works for you, or if your strategy is just radically different than mine, right? Because it's too small of a time frame to change and see improvement. What you're going to do, or at least what I do, right, is you're going to do a full read of the passage, but you're not really focused on the details. You're just looking for the particular location of details. You're not exactly sure what they are. You have a general idea of what the details are, but you're more focused on what happens where in the passage generally, so I can remember for questions and do a deep read if I actually need to go back, right? But one thing I also do that helps me just keep an idea of the passage, because I'm not focused on specific details anymore, is I make a main idea concept of every single paragraph. After every paragraph, I just generally think of a main idea, right, for that paragraph. And what that does is it helps me figure out the main idea of the whole thing and just what happens in the passage, right? You're going to go from easiest to hardest to questions, obviously, but what I like to do is I put main idea questions at the end, right? Main idea questions at the end are going to help you, because doing all of the questions actually helps you get to the main idea, right? Unless that main idea question is about a specific paragraph, in which I would recommend actually doing it while. So if it's the hardest question for you, do it at the end and then do the main idea of the whole passage, like those types of questions. But yeah, that's just how I do it. And there aren't many specific strategies you can apply for reading. They're way more applicable to grammar and especially math. But these are just generally some things you can implement to try to eliminate answer choices. Okay, grammar. The idea of grammar, right, is that if you fully understand all the grammatical concepts and you have them explicitly memorized in your head, you would never get a question wrong, right? It's not about how you feel about it, or about like a standard convention, or about like just, oh, like if if you just know English, you just know the grammar. It's not about that at all, because it's about how it's explicitly written, right? It's actually not about how it's spoken at all, because spoken English is just so different, because it's not, you're not like actively thinking about commas. You just put pauses where pauses are needed, but that's not always necessarily true with written stuff, right? There are specific rules you have to implement with written things, with commas, with every single type of grammatical tool, with independent, dependent clauses. If you knew all of those, you'd never get a question wrong, right? So the idea is learn all of them, right? The main idea is if you know every single one and you know it fully, you would never get a question wrong. You would be able to instantly figure out why certain answer choices are incorrect, why certain things are have to be correct, and why certain things cannot be possible to add in there due to some reason, right? If you learn all those concepts, you're going to ace this portion. That's pretty much it, right? But here's some specific instances that you might be able to use in order to help you, right? So for commas, the idea is we want to figure out if the comma explicitly has a purpose. We don't care about what we think. We care about, okay, independent, dependent clauses. Do the commas work as combining an independent or dependent clause? Like, does the comma also have a fanboys attached to it if it's attaching an independent and independent clause, right? These are things that you need to know about, right? And is the comma have a purpose? Like, is it being used to put a supplemental phrase in between a independent clause? Is it used in a list, right? Does the comma serve an actual purpose, right? We need to figure that out. That's how you do all comma questions, because every comma has a purpose. It's not just about how the question breaks or what it sounds like. Okay, for redundancy, right? And this is one of those concepts that isn't exactly grammatical, but it's a stylistic choice that everyone should adopt in the sort of papers that they write, right? They shouldn't be repeating things that are not really needed, right? You always want to pick the most concise one, but for redundancy specifically, the only scenarios where the most concise answer is not correct is, if it doesn't include all the details, it's not grammatically correct, right? So it doesn't attach to the previous phrase correctly. And this is the most important one, right? Because this is the one people miss all the time, is if the pronoun usage becomes incorrect as a result of the change. So if I use like it or that, or I use some sort of thing and it's supposed to reference this previous concept, but now that I've shortened the phrase, what I'm specifically referencing to like isn't exactly clear anymore. It could mean multiple different things. That's where the thing actually, it doesn't become grammatically incorrect in a way, but the pronoun usage becomes unclear, so in that way it becomes incorrect, right? So the relationship between the pronoun and the whatever noun it's trying to refer to becomes blurry and you don't know which is which anymore, then it's actually incorrect and you have to go with, the slightly larger one, but it actually is clear what the it or the dat is referring to, right? And also, obviously, skip the questions you aren't sure of. Make sure you fully get the questions right that you know the concepts to first, and then go back to the ones that you're unsure of and try to remember all the concepts that you do know to eliminate answer choices, and then just pick from the one that the sounding by ear is never going to be correct. So you're just kind of have to figure out what is the most grammatically correct. That's why I emphasize, like, I don't want you to be guessing. I want you to just fully understand them. You can go on Khan Academy and just learn all of the grammar rules in probably less than 4 or 5 hours, right? That's what I want you to do. You're going to get a full mastery of it if you do that, right? Okay, so overall for math, you want to skip the lengthier questions if you don't understand them, and crush all the ones that you do fully understand, all the smaller questions and all the questions on concepts that you fully understand. Get all of them first and then go back to the hard ones, right? What you're going to do is you have to be extremely mindful of these two ideas, right? And the idea is, what is the question actually asking you to solve for, right? And what specific details do you need to get to the solution, right? So what is the question actually asking us? Like, they give us a variable, but is the question actually asking us to find the variable and that's it? Or is it like a combination of the variables or like a manipulation of them? And how do I find out that information? What is the specific detail? Make sure you don't miswrite that or misread that, and then just implement it, right? And for math, the next strategies that I'm going to get into are going to be so specific. This is the one section where test taking strategies can radically boost your score versus anything else, right? So here are some general strategies. Careless mistakes, you're going to slow down. Focus on every aspect of the problem, highlight the important details, and practice that type of problem a bunch. That's the only way to really target careless mistakes. Just slow down because you're rushing, and you rushing is making you miss certain details. The only reason why you make careless mistakes is you're missing certain details, right? You know the question. There's no need to get it wrong, right? Eliminate or pick based on similarity, right? This one's a tough one because, I essentially said if it's similar, you can eliminate or pick, right? But here's how you can actually use it, right? If two answers have something, and it's like, let's say it's like a coordinate, right, on the Cartesian plane, right, XY plane, and you have like 2 comma 0, and every single answer choice is 2 comma something, right? Then that has to be correct, right? And that with that idea that you can use that to actually solve for your problem, right? But let's say only 2 of those answer choices have it. Chances are that it can either be correct or incorrect, right? And you don't necessarily know that. If 2 answer choices have something, and like, let's say the 2 comma to not be correct, and there's a third answer choice that has it and all 3 of them do, then you can eliminate all 3 of them, right? And if you're picking on similarity, if you don't know about the correctness, right, but every single one has a repeated number, or all 3 of them have a repeated number, and other 3 of them have a repeated number, so the first 3 answer choices have 2 as the x coordinate, and the last 3 answer choices have 3 as the y coordinate, then obviously that would make B and C the same. But this, in a hypothetical scenario, you would know that actually both of those concepts are more likely to be correct, right? Because the SAT is thinking, oh, they know how to get this one, but they might get this one wrong. So let's flip them around, and let's make a bunch of them the right answer on the X and a bunch of them the right answer on the Y, and just have them like figure it out, right? And it's relying on the fact that you will mess up one, but actually in the same way, it helps you guess that both the 2 and the 3 are correct because it's repeated so many times. So that's a way that you can pick on similarity. But essentially, I wouldn't rely on it too much. And this is just like a form of getting questions correct that you might not necessarily need to do. But if you're really guessing and you have a structure of answers that are like this can be helpful for you, right? And I already explained repeated numbers with talking about similarity, but again, if you have those repeated numbers, like all of them have 2 in as the x coordinate, then that has to be right. But now that that has to be right, you can actually use that in solving for your answer, right? So use that in solving for your y, and you don't need to solve for x anymore, right? That's a way to just help you save time. Okay, so here's some specific strategies for specific questions, right? So for graph questions, you should know the standard forms of every single type of graph. So the y equals square root x, y equals x squared, y equals e to the power of x, or y equals like any base to the power of x, like what it would look like. You need to know those kinds, and you need to know all the variables that, like, all the standard forms of those equations, and how every single number like changes the equation, right? So how does a manipulate y equals ax squared, right? How does it like, move it side to side? Does it increase the factor, right? It increases like the factor of like how like stretched the graph is, essentially, right? So you need to know all those things, and also you need to fully understand for word problems all the information that it's giving you and all the relationships that it gives you and what you need to solve for. If you explicitly write all those details, it becomes way easier to find what you're looking for, right? So for algebra problems, there's almost always a shortcut. And the reason why that is because they almost never ask you to just solve for like x or solve for y. They always ask you to like solve for like 2x plus 12, right? But that 2x plus 12 can be easily found by just manipulating the answer, right? Without solving for the variable. So any sort of algebra problem, always look for that kind of shortcut because it's so common on every single SAT, especially all the modern ones, right? All the 2021, 2022 exams have had that, and it's bound to happen on all the 2023 exams as well. Okay, don't worry about October being your last chance to take the SAT, right? Don't forget that you still have the November SAT, and you can submit your score late in the portal, right? Let's say you're a senior applying to colleges. October SAT is not actually your last chance. You can take the November SAT and submit it for most early decision schools and almost all early action schools that you're applying to and submit it late in their portal. I've done this, and I've got into one of the schools that I applied early action to by submitting my SAT score late, right? And if you're doing regular decision, you can obviously take the December SAT as well. And that being said, learning is the main driver of a high score. It's not these tips and strategies. You're going to use them less and less as you learn more and get less and less generally correct. So that's the main driver of a high score. If you're interested in just a free consultation where I can help you on any sort of problems that you have, and SAT prep, or my SAT private community where I have discussions with all my members, and we have lots of resources in there, like 6 years of official QAS tests. Apply below, because the spots are very limited and I don't have much time to help absolutely everybody. So it's first come, first serve. Thank you guys so much, and I hope you learned something today.